All right, so this is a Generac generator. Basically, customer said that it wouldn't start, so he got on Amazon, got an Amazon carburetor, installed it, and it still wouldn't start, and it appears to be leaking some kind of gas. So, basically we got it exactly like this with the air filter off, the old carburetor, and it looks like a gasket. And it definitely is some kind of Amazon carburetor. So the problem with the Amazon carburetors is tolerances. We see a lot of issues with these Amazon carburetors, so I highly suggest against them. Always recommend go with the OE. Also, I have a huge success rate on going through these carburetors, cleaning them, and getting them up and going, especially with these OE ones. So when I was taking a quick look at this machine, I noticed that it doesn't look like a gasket was installed properly. It looks like some of this may have been installed incorrectly, because this should not be covered. And what I'm seeing is, if I hold up the original carburetor, this whole area is getting covered, which it should not be. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this carburetor off, and we're going to take a look to see what exactly is all going on in here, what is leaking, and so forth. So let's see here. Pull this and pull that there. So this, normally these can pop off like so, and then we can hopefully snake it out. So there's a breather tube connected. You can usually pinch this and kind of help pull it out. And that's where the breather tube was, right there. And then there's a little slit in this that kind of sits in. So I'm gonna pull that off. And what I'm noticing is things are pretty wet right over here. So I'm wondering if that's where some of the leakage is. But anyway, I'm noticing right offhand, right here, this gasket is definitely does not belong here. So we're gonna go ahead and pull that off. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and pull this carburetor off, and we're gonna clean the original one. I just do not trust these carburetors. I've had nothing but issues with these carburetors. If you notice, they're all baby smooth. There's no imprinting on there, which, like this one says Walbro on it. There's nothing on this here. That's also an indicator that this is some kind of knockoff. So generally what happens is Walbro can make like 1 million of these, and 99.9% of these will be just fine. You can just bolt them up and you're ready to go. They can make 1 million of these cheap knockoff ones, and probably a good 50% or more of them may not work. You can try adjusting or even sometimes drilling up the main jet. In some cases, you may be able to get it to work. Some may just work as a bolt-on, but that's not always the case. So to alleviate all of the monkeying around on that, we're gonna go ahead and pull this carburetor off. So I need to, in order to get this carburetor off, we have to pull these 2 studs. So let me get the correct socket for that. Let's see, what is that? That's usually pretty small. Let's see, so it's not metric. So that's SAE, and we are looking at 4mm for that. So
why would they use such a weird, funky?
Yeah, this isn't the normal way they do it now. Now there's usually studs sticking out and 2 10mm nuts that screw down instead of these studs. I'm not a huge fan of the studs, because what can happen is over time you can wear out the casting here for the intake tube, or you can end up stripping this out, whatever the case is. It just puts undue stress on the intake tube when you could just put a nut on there. So go ahead and loosen these up, but before we take this off, I want to take this fuel line off, which is right here. Let me grab so before I disconnect that, I'm going to make sure this fuel is off, and it is not. So I just turn off the fuel. It's on the right off the tank. Let me grab a couple paper towels because we are going to leak a little bit of gas. We'll just set those down there. Pull that down. Kind of rock it back and forth, just kind of break it loose, and then disconnect it. All right, so fortunately, there's not much gas coming out. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this off. And also part of the reason why they use these studs is, if you notice this here, where the throttle arm connects to the governor arm, it's very short, and so instead of pulling it out and sliding it out and then being able to take it off, or instead of just moving this plastic clip over to then just pop it off, in this case you'll have to rock the carburetor to get it off. So get these studs loose or removed. And then, so this gasket was installed just like that. It looks like it's more so of a heat shield. And then on here, you can pop it out and pull it out like so. So that's the Amazon carb. I mean, it looks like he got lucky in regards to they do look the same, but it's just, one's just cheap, and generally we have a lot of issues with these, so that's why I don't like to deal with these. We just go back to fixing the original one. Okay, so one thing I want to check is there was an oil leak, or not oil leak, I'm sorry, a fuel leak. And I want to see that, since I have all of this off, I want to see if we're leaking anywhere right offhand before I go about cleaning this carburetor and then installing it. That way I have everything out of the way. I can get a better view of everything. So what I'm going to do is put my thumb over this. So how this works on this particular generator, you have a gas tank, you have a fuel valve, fuel comes down through this line and through this fuel filter, goes over and connects to this fuel pump. It's connected to this line up here, and then right down here is your fuel line that's connected directly to the carburetor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my finger over this. I'm going to turn on the fuel, and I'm going to turn this over slowly to kind of pump the fuel through the system to see if we're leaking fuel anywhere. And so far, everything looks really good.
That whole shroud's moving back and forth when you pull it.
Oh yeah, this is really loose.
Is it missing a bolt or?
Yeah, well, it looks like up above it's probably messed up. Oh, we're just starting to get some fuel.
There's a leakage.
Okay, so we do have some leakage, and I saw it back there. And so I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. So we're gonna go ahead and turn off this fuel and let a little of this drain. We're gonna have to pull this fuel pump off because there is possibly something wrong with this fuel pump. Probably because this whole case, or yeah, so it looks like up here it's cracked. So that's definitely going to be a problem because some of the stuff we may not be able to even get. So
the whole
the shroud's cracked.
Yeah, so we'll inspect that here in a second. Let's take this off the engine case, and then let's inspect that. Oh yeah. Okay, so I even saw more fuel come down, so something's not right.
Oh, look at that. It's just like on my mower. That's an old school. They used to mount those on the front of the old Twins.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the same fuel pump.
So it looks like on this, where's the tube for vacuum? Okay, so this tube right here is from crankcase pressure. And so this is what is allowing the diaphragm within this pump to move back and forth to allow fuel to kind of pump through. It's overall, you could basically just do a gravity fed system because gas is up higher. There's really no need for this, but they installed them on some of these things. So I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect this line. This is the upper line.
Could be a bad diaphragm, or it could be those 3 screws on the back need to be tightened.
Yeah, and they may need to be tightened, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull this off. We're going to open this up. We're going to inspect, make sure that the diaphragm is not cracked, which is causing the leakage. So we're just going to inspect everything on that. So we're going to loosen this up. So we're going to remember this upper one is for vacuum. This one here is for fuel from the tank. It shouldn't. This one's fuel for the tank. There we go. All right, so let me grab, let's see, so that's definitely not the right size. So let me grab my air here. Set that there. Let me grab what I think is
You're gonna cast a wind spell?
Possibly, yeah, possibly quarter. So I think, yeah, so that's quarter. So what I'm gonna do is just kind of blow some of this stuff off, and then we're gonna open this up and take a quick look.
I bet that's the same diaphragm that I have on my old
I wouldn't.
17 horsepower, because it looks
Yep.
exactly the same.
Exactly, I wouldn't be surprised.
Built onto the, I think it was, I can't remember if it was part of the carburetor. I think it's part of the carburetor.
I think it is on the side. Yeah, it's mounted right on the side of it.
Right.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm used to seeing that plate, and I've rebuilt one of those things a couple of times.
Okay, so that, pull that, and then right here is usually a spring. Yep.
Yeah.
So so far all of this looks pretty good, but we're gonna clean everything. We're gonna just double check, just so I'm not.
Yeah, that's identical to what's on the old.
And then this looks like it kind of pulled in a little bit. Let me grab a little flathead and see if we can kind of help nudge, or actually I'm gonna grab a pick. It'll be a little easier. Then grab my friend Seafoam. So when you go and pull these off, just be very gentle. Don't go crazy on these because you don't want to rip them. Just kind of work your way. What I usually do is if they start to really be hard, then what I like to do is spray some Seafoam behind it. And then sometimes even on my tool, just kind of work your way up and around and see if you can kind of gently lift it. There we go. So it looks like it's like a cork like gasket, and so I'm going to venture to think that it's basically these screws got loose and it was just slowly leaking out. So we're gonna go ahead and put this all back together. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna wipe these off. I personally like to spray Seafoam on them. And then we're going to reinstall it on here, like so. Same thing with this guy. Okay, and then how this works is this has the spring that goes on first. Then you have the little cap over the spring, and this is so that it doesn't cut into the little diaphragm. This diaphragm right here. And then this goes on like so. And what I'm going to do is it's all going to be a sandwich. So we're going to first, let's get that out. Let's get this side lined up. This, like so. Make sure that's in place. And then I'm going to start by placing these through to help keep everything lined up. And then install that spring in that center there. There's a little bit of a groove in there to help kind of center it and keep it center. And then there's a little groove on there where that sits. And this goes just like so. And then make sure you're lining this up properly. And this will all kind of sandwich together. There you go. And now, just make sure, get this snug, get this snug, and then this snug, and then just a little turn, just to make sure everything's nice and taut. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just wipe this off. And we can hook this back up. So, fuel line, if we remember correctly, fuel line here, breather up here. And our fuel line is this one here. So this one connects to the lower section. And then make sure that clip gets back into place. And the same thing with the breather tube. Move that back, make it a little easier. And now this clip. Back into place. All right. So now that we got everything back in place, we're going to check to see if it's leaking again. And wipe all this off. And we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to plug this with my thumb, turn on the fuel line, and then I'm going to slowly crank this. Yeah, that has to get fixed.
It needs like a plate added on. I can't believe how thin the metal is.
Yeah, it's just pop, basically tin. And so far, everything looks really good. I am not seeing any leaks or anything. So I'm going to turn off this fuel line. And now we need to address this pulser assembly. So let's see what we got going on here. So with the pulser assembly, we generally have two bolts, one here, and generally two bolts up here. But the problem is, this is already messed up. So I'm going to take these bolts out from down below, and ironically, this one's like just about to fall out. And then I'm gonna take, let's see if this one's the same. Nope, that one doesn't want to come out. So I think that might be 3/8. Yep. Let's get this out and get a good visual on what exactly is going on. Yeah, and what can happen is when pulling on it, it can.
It's metal fatigue vibration.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
It's a real thin piece of metal, and
I
can't even tell quite where it's broken. I mean, I can see there are several spots where it's obviously broken.
Normally, oh yeah, you can see it now. So if I move this, hopefully, maybe I can move this over here. Yep, there we go. All right, so I'll set this bolt down. So I'm gonna pull this out.
That's
I gotta
interfere with the governor. It could easily interfere because this thing's governor is one of those air vane. Oh no, that's
no, that's not the governor. The governor's right here, and it's mechanical on the inside on this particular one.
It's one of those air vane flabby.
Yeah, it almost looks like that because some of them have that right here. So I just disconnected the kill switch, and on here you can see that's where the kill switch is. It was just a plug right there. So what's happened is this is all busted off. So I can see that there's still some of this metal bits.
The remains.
Yeah, right here. Oop. Well, that middle bit somewhere in there, which let me get this nut off and take this other one. And same gig. So here's a little piece of it. So you can see it is super, super thin.
Yeah, the vibration just did her in, huh?
Yep. So that's unfortunate because I don't know if we can get this cover. I'll have to look it up, but I don't know if we can get this cover anymore. So let me take a quick look online and see what we're looking at. Let me pull this up. Those on there. So, all right. So trying to figure out the best thing to do because this tin is no longer available unless we try to find someone used. They no longer make it. So what I'm thinking of doing for now is I'm gonna put these screws back in. I found these washers. They're a little wider. I'm gonna set them on there and tighten it down like so. And then I'm hoping I can do like a quick little tack and then maybe get a little bit of a weld on there to at least hopefully hold that in place temporarily so that the customer at least has something to work with in the meantime. Let me grab one other washer. This washer's the wrong size apparently. Let's see here. So unfortunately I don't have a little wider washer, I only have one that's a little wider. Ideally what I want to do, what I'm thinking is I'll see if I can get a couple of body-like washers, something kind of like this, this one here, and then with this up in place I can tack this to make sure it's in the proper place, pull this back off, and then weld this on until we can get a replacement tin. So for now I'll go ahead and just leave those in place and then get this kind of mounted. Of course, this is really hard. I'm kind of basically having to feel her out. There we go. Got that one started. Do my yoga.
For the money.
There we go. Got that one started. All right. So we'll kind of snug these up. So the upper bolts we're going to have to address later. I want to see if I can at least make sure this generator actually runs and is outputting power before I get too crazy on trying to find a 10, because if we aren't outputting power and we're having other issues, then none of this is even worth it. It looks like this little shield here, or not shield, but more of air deflector needs to go, or guide, not deflector. And then we're gonna snug this up. I'm hoping I can just kind of pinch what's there just enough. This one's not doing anything, but at least that's actually much better than what it was. So we at least have something for right now. All right, so I did find another washer. That's the same.
Very professional.
So
You had to ask his parts department.
So basically, I'm gonna see if I can kind of tack this onto here. Ideally, this needs to get replaced. So I did pull this off. I've reconnected this wire, and then I bolted it up down here. Now we gotta we gotta bolt this fuel pump back into place. So this, yeah, that moves over out of the way. It's kind of the handle.
It's on the wrong side of the generator.
Yeah, it's technically supposed to be upright and sticking out.
It goes.
Yeah, you're right, and it does go on the other side. This is the wheel side. Okay, so we'll get this attached on there.
Tin Man.
See, the thing is if we didn't check for this leak, we would have had to pull this carburetor back off anyway. So since we already know that it was something was leaking, that's why we don't put everything back on, only to have to take it all back off if we can help it. So this is now secured on there. We can at least do some testing. So now that we fixed the fuel pump leak, fix this temporarily, we can go ahead and go through this carburetor. So what we're gonna do is, we don't know the condition of this carburetor and why he pulled it off and ended up replacing it, other than he said it wouldn't start. There could be numerous reasons why it didn't start. Yeah, like the fuel pump. So we're just gonna go open this up. We're gonna just confirm that there's no issues with this carburetor, and then we're gonna reinstall it. So let me grab a few paper towels, grab some mineral spirits, and we'll start taking this apart and exploring if there's any possibilities of carb issues. So, all right, so what I always like to do before I tear a carburetor apart is I like to clean the outside of the carburetor of all this grit so that I'm not getting it on the inside. So basically, a can of mineral spirits and a toothbrush, just kind of go over the whole thing. But what I like about mineral spirits is it's a great oil remover. And I've used this for years and it works great. So now, okay, so now that the outside is fairly clean, we're going to go ahead and open up this carb and remove this float bowl. I'll open this up, remove the bowl, and it looks pretty dry. It doesn't look horrible. We'll just kind of do a quick cleaning on it. So we'll pull this pin out, pull the float off, which usually has the needle attached to it. And then we'll do a quick cleaning of the carb. And so to clean these carbs, basically, I'll hit it with a little bit of mineral spirit on the outside and stuff. I try not to take these float bowl gaskets off unless I absolutely have to. Generally speaking, you can get away with leaving them on. And most of the time they're fine, but there are times when you're going to have to replace them where they're too rotted. This one doesn't look horrible, and so far it looks decent. Now, even though it looks decent, doesn't mean it's going to seal properly. We'll know later when we go to put everything back together and test this car. So we're going to go ahead and remove the main jet, and the main jet's located just in here. Let me grab my flathead. So when you remove the main jet, you just got to have care. Make sure you have a nice flat screwdriver. Make sure it's in there, nice and flat. Press firmly and gently start to pull out. Or unscrew, I should say. So with this carburetor, with this particular carburetor, so your main jet is this lower portion right here. This whole section is considered your emulsion tube. I don't really see anything that's plugged up per se. Everything, when I'm looking down, I'm checking things, I'm seeing when I'm looking down these holes, especially down this main jet, I'm seeing if it looks perfectly round. And if I don't see light at the back side of that or looking through it and I don't see it's perfectly round, then that tells me that there's stuff in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and just hit this with a little bit of mineral spirits, just kind of, and the air, just kind of clean it. And then I'm just gonna double check, looking down, and everything is looking good. So this is nice, ready to go. I'm just going to blow down through here. Make sure all of that's clear. Down through here. The vent. And everything looks good. So one last thing I like to do is real quick is use some sea foam and start spraying down each one of those orifices, just confirm that I see some fluids going through, just to make sure that it's not plugged up. So of course this is just a big opening, and then so that's going through. And this is fuel, which I'll see through here. And that looks good. And so far everything is looking good. So then I'll just chase it out with air. Okay, so all that is looking good so far. So now we're going to pull this needle off, and this needle slides out through the side. There's a little slit right here, and I'm just sliding it out through there. You can see kind of there's a little slit through there. So I'm going to pull this out, and what I'm doing is I'm inspecting the side of the needle and stuff, making sure there's no gumminess, looking at the rubber tip, the needle tip, making sure that head looks good and everything looks good. I've seen where these heads are off or they're coming off, and this one looks good. So now I'm just going to kind of clean this real quick. And then I'm going to hit a little bit of seafoam. Looks like I'm just about out on this. On that, I like having seafoam on those. I like to install them wet, just to make sure everything's good. These I'm just going to quickly clean up with a little bit of mineral spirits. Same thing with the bowl. So overall, this carb is actually in pretty clean. There's really, I don't think he was having carb issues from what I'm seeing, but I wanted to go through it just to make sure, because once I install it and then find out it's not right, then I got to pull it back off, and it's just better since it's already there. I had to pull that off anyway. We might as well go through this just to make absolutely sure everything's good and reinstall. So one note to pay attention of is on this needle here, there's a little head here and there's a spring. Just make sure that that is moving in and out as it should. And part of the reason why I like to use mineral spirits, or not mineral spirits, I'm sorry, seafoam, it just kind of helps lube everything up just to make sure everything is moving. And this one's moving nice, like it should. And so we got to reinstall the needle back into the float. You can see there's a little flap right here. In this case, that is going up. And what that's doing is when the float comes down, it can rest against where the needle seats. Just so it's just, that's just the stop there. So make sure you install it that way and not this way. It may, more than likely, you're going to have issues of that needle not seating properly if you don't have it installed properly. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall this needle back through this slot. Oops. And then carefully line everything up, set it on there, and get our pin and reinstall. And make sure it's evenly spaced. Now, one thing I like to do also is make sure that the float is fairly level to the face here, and it's pretty level. I think it will be fine. In this case, if I wanted to make an adjustment to this float, I would have to heat this up and then bend this up or down. Adjustable ones, nice, easy adjustable ones are actually metal, but unfortunately this one's plastic, so I'm gonna leave it as is. I believe it's just fine. There's no issues with it. Now we're gonna go ahead and reinstall this emulsion tube and main jet. I always like to put some seafoam in there. It just kind of lubes everything, and then we can start to screw this back down. Okay, so now I just got it snug. So what I like to do is get it snug, and then just barely get a little bit more, but not by much. You don't want to He-Man it where you bust up part of the brass there, because if you do that to try to take it out, possibly it's going to be a real pain. So now we're going to go ahead and install our float bowl. And then what I like to do, since these are generally some kind of paper or rubber and stuff, what I like to do when I go to install these is apply a little bit of seafoam as a lubricant, because when you go to try to install these dry, more than likely you're going to rip that. And so by applying a little bit of seafoam there, it's a nice little lubricant that helps kind of keep that from getting damaged. And then when you go to install it, just get it snug, and then just a little bit, like so. And see, everything looks good there. So now that it has been gone through, there's really not much more you could do. You could, so there's a screw on here, and that's, so with the screw on the towards the head, this is your throttle plate, and so this is your this would be considered your fuel air mixture screw. If it was on this side, it would be considered your air fuel mixture screw. So you'd be adjusting for air, this one you'd be adjusting for fuel. So you could take this out and clean this. And what you would do is you would count how many turns in, and then back it back out to exactly where it was when going to reinstall it. But you would find out, count how many turns in, pull it all the way out, clean it, blow some air in it, some seafoam and stuff, and then screw it back down to bottom, and then back it out exactly the same number of turns. I try not to mess with these unless I absolutely have to. If this carburetor was gunky, I would have gone through this, but since this carburetor was pretty clean, I don't see the need to go through this unless I have running issues. And usually this is for the idle adjustment and stuff. So let's go ahead and reinstall this. Now, this apparently came with this kit, apparently came with a couple gaskets. So what I'm noticing is this paper gasket fits nicely over that. Now, he had a aluminum like gasket, and which also acts like a shield, and I'm going to install that just like he had it, so that we can kind of keep the heat off the carburetor to hopefully help reduce any chances of having what's that word, there's an issue where it can get the carburetor so hot that when you're sucking fuel through the carburetor, it can turn into get vapor locked because it's too hot. So I'm going to install this on there in hopes that that will help for possible vapor lock issues. So we're going to go ahead and run these screws through. Oh, before I do that, I need to reinstall this throttle arm. So how that works is it looks like there's a spring here. That's for lash. So what that does is it helps take out the lash with the throttle arm. So let me put that on just like so. And so what I mean by that is when you move this forward and backwards, there's going to be a little bit of play where that seats in there. This throttle arm seats into this piece. And what this spring does is it helps take out that lash there. And if you didn't have that, what can happen, especially on certain pieces of equipment, you can end up getting surging. So the governor will kind of slightly adjust, and then it will kind of go back and forth because of that lash. So to take that out, you use the spring to help kind of take that out. And as you can see, when I push on this, the spring gets tighter. And so that's one way you can tell to make sure that it's just hot enough to help kind of take out that lash. So now that we got that on, I'm gonna slip this gasket kind of under and through and kind of get things roughly lined up. I'll run these studs through. There we go. Okay, so now get these tight. So again, don't go crazy, just get snug and then a little turn like that. Same thing with this, get snug and then a little turn like that. So we got to get our fuel line reconnected. And get our support there. So what I like to do at this point, I like to kind of verify that we're getting fuel in here and see how it's spraying through that emulsion tube, essentially through the carburetor, just to confirm that we're getting fuel through it and stuff. So I'm going to turn this in the off position so we're not getting spark to the spark plug. I'm going to turn the fuel in the on position. And then we're going to go ahead and turn this over. I'm going to kind of hold this just to kind of support it. And see, on this particular float bowl, there is no drain screw, so I can't just crack it open and see if I have fuel in this carb. So what I do is making sure I'm not blowing any dirt in there. So I usually blow, away first. I take my air hose, put it just next to the emulsion tube, and start blowing over it. And see how it kind of sprays out? That is perfect. So I know we are getting great fuel flow. Everything looks good there. So I feel very confident about that. So now that's sorted, I'm gonna go ahead and check oil because I have not checked it yet. I wanna make sure we have adequate oil and it is completely full. It is basically right here. On these particular generators, you can't technically overfill them. This is just a cap. Excuse me. So if you filled it up or you tipped it or whatever to fill it up and you set it back level, just make sure whatever extra drains out, and once it settles out, that's technically completely full. You want it, pretty close to the top here. There's really, you don't want to go too far down from that. And some of these, especially the older ones, if you go too much lower, you will trip that low oil sensor and it will shut it off. So I don't have my choke hooked up, so I'm gonna hook this, I'm gonna reinstall this. And how this works for the choke is it moves this flap in and out. And so you just have to make sure when you install it, the flap is back all the way. So essentially in the run position to open it up. And then that way when you go to install it and you hit the choke, it'll push on that plate. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this to the run position, and we're going to install the proper gasket on this side, which it looks like it's this one. And one way you can tell is you can see it's all cut out compared to this one. So that's the difference. Now when I go and install it on there, you can see it's sealing all the way around, keeping those parts open. Whereas this one, it is not. So this one definitely goes back here, but we have this heat shield that we're using, so we don't need this one. And then this one goes on here like so. And then to install this, we also did not forget this breather tube. So we're gonna get this connected they can be kind of a pain. And then you can kind of see it right here. Now it's in place. And then you can set it on here. And what you can do is just double check. When you move this flat, when you move it from run to choke, if I go to choke, make sure that choke plate closes. If I go to run, it opens, close, open. So just double check that before you bolt it down. Otherwise, you're probably gonna have to pull it back off. And then let's get these bolts or nuts reinstalled. I have a feeling this is the wrong size.
Reinstall.
Oh, I see what it's hidden. It was hidden in this plate right here. Yep, reinstalling. All right, so we get it snug, then a little bit. Get it snug, a little bit. Just don't go reefing. Now, we'll reinstall our little handle. Pull it out and just kind of push it on. There we go. All right, so that's choke, that's run. So fuel's on. And we are going to see if she fires up. So now that we got the fuel sorted out, fuel's on, we temporarily have this set up so it's holding. I'm still gonna kind of support it. We're gonna fire it up and we're gonna check to make sure it's outputting proper voltage and frequency. So on this, we have a 30 amp, 120 and a 20 amp. Okay, so I'm gonna grab my meter and a little extension cord along with my heat gun. So I always like to test for load or test it under a load. So I'm gonna hook this up real quick. Like so. All right, so one more thing. Sometimes some carburetors, they don't like to, they won't run properly unless the air filter is installed. I'm not saying that's the case on this one, but I'm gonna go ahead and install it just to make sure everything is proper.
Being distracted.
Doggy. Okay. All right, so air filter's on. We checked oil. And do a quick check on gas. Gas looks good. Fuel's on. Now we're gonna go ahead and fire it up. So switch on, choke on. I'm gonna kind of support this if I can. So, coming to our voltmeter, we're at 61 hertz, and we're at 129 volts. So we're within range, so we're good. So, voltage and frequency is good. Switch over to watts, and then apply. That's 1500 watts, roughly. Low. Then again, one more time. We're gonna go ahead and turn that off. I'm gonna turn off the fuel. Shut her down.
I'm not sure you'll be able to hear anything. Nothing is
It's pretty loud.
deafening.
So, it does run, but I wanted to check to see if it's leaking fuel, and it is leaking some fuel. So, unfortunately, that fuel pump will have to get replaced, and this cover will have to get replaced. So, those are two things we have to do. But it is running now.
Be a rebuild kit for the, if it's just one of those diaphragms or seals is bad.
Yeah, some of them have a rebuild kit, and then
Crack, maybe.
yeah, and then sometimes you can just get the whole thing. I'll have to look. It's been a while since I've had to do anything with that particular style of pump. Worst case scenario, they do have other fuel pumps that we don't have to even mount on there, and we can just use one of those generic ones. And I have an assortment of those. I just don't have that particular pump because that's an older style. But so outside of having to fix that, in this case, it does run now, unlike before, and so we just have to address those last few things, and we're good to go. All right, so I wanted to give a little update on this. So basically, this is the old fuel pump. The new fuel pump is different than the old. They don't make this anymore. This is been superseded. So now the fuel pump looks like this. And so on these fuel pumps, there's usually an indicator on here. It says P right here on the face here for pulse. That's where your vacuum hooks up. And then some of them will have like a little arrow pointing in or out on here somewhere. And on this one, it is hard to see, but there's a little arrow right here pointing up, saying that this is the in. And then on this one, there's a little arrow pointing down, saying this one goes out. So this is where the old fuel pump was, and that's where the new one installs. And you can't reuse these holes on the casing. It's just and it's not necessary, to be honest. So I did fix this up here. What I ended up doing is welding on those two washers since this blower housing is no longer available. So went ahead and welded those washers in, and now everything, this engine cover is holding like it should. So that's just a little update on this. I just gotta put it all back together and do one last test, make sure everything's good, and then deliver it to the customer.